Hello everybody, recording live from somewhere. This is Zach Couples with episode number 64. That's 6-4 Impala of the Movement Debrief. And tonight, folks, we got some topics that are just really good. We're going to talk about Rectus Abdominis, which I have, but you just can't visibly see it right now. Stay tuned though, I'm working with my big dog Ben House on that. That's what's number one. We're going to talk about my movement limitations. How am I screwed up? Physically, from a movement standpoint, not the other ways. That's what's also on docket. And last but not least, we're going to talk about stability. Does that govern all of our movement limitations and capabilities? These are the questions tonight, and they are asked from the people, answered for the people, by this people. Fam, recognize fam. Before I dive in, guys, do you have people that maybe don't have access to all of their movement capabilities and it's hindering their fat loss or muscle gain goals? Do you have people who hurt everywhere and you're unsure where to start? These are problems that we all have at some point in our careers. I want to solve them for you, or at least help you, push you along the path via Human Matrix, because it is coming your way. 4 places next week, folks. October 27th and 28th in Casimo, Kansas City, Missouri. Tech 9 will be there. Yes, he will. Then we got November 10th and 11th in Portland, Oregon. After that, December 8th and 9th, it's going to be in Charleston, SC, South Carolina. The last place for now is going to be in New Jersey, February 2nd and 3rd. And a little special thing, guys, just released this week. There will be a link in the show notes, which will be available on zachcouples.com tomorrow. But I, myself, Pat Davidson, and Seth Oberst will be teaming up for the Revolution, where we all present our models and build a nice continuum from the lowest level of rehabilitation to the highest level of performance. And that is going to be in Boston, Needham, Massachusetts, in that area, February 8th and 9th of next year. You definitely want to sign up and give that a shot. So that is my housekeeping. Before I debrief, shall we? A quick story today about a patient that I had. Because while I talk about improving movement limitations and things along those lines, I think this was a very salient point for me, and I think clinicians don't talk enough about their failures. And today, this was kind of inspired by a post Daddy O Pops did, Bill Hartman. I'll link it in the show notes. I don't have a pen. Bill post. But what happened was Bill was discussing when you get the outcome you want, but it's because of luck and it's not because you made the right move. And I have a story today that signifies that. So I had this patient, this was like the 4th time I've seen him, and he had lower back pain. It's pretty debilitating, couldn't move much. And this guy, he's an older dude, but he's pretty yoked. Like, no joke, guy trains like hard 5 to 6 days a week. I mean, off the easy. I wish I had his pecs. I wish I had them shoulders, got like the bowling ball shoulders. I'm like, man, this guy is putting in the work and I appreciate him so much. But his gains are really being hampered by this debilitating back pain he's had. And he came in, we would do some treatment, he'd say, yeah, I feel pretty good. And then as soon as he'd leave, symptoms would be gone. Or not, would come back, I should say. So we did this back and forth a few times. And today he comes in and he says, this is the worst my back has been. I'm starting to get some pain down my leg. I'm starting to get, my leg just feels weak, his right leg. And so we're kind of talking back and forth about, hey, maybe we need to do some type of other intervention. He was going to see the MD that day, and I was telling him, hey, maybe I recommend we do like a injection or something like that. And I said, I want to build my case. I'm going to go through and do a quick neuro examination and see what's going on. And I did that, tested reflexes, things were Gucci. I go to test myotones, so I do manual muscle testing. This is like the one time you'll ever see me do manual muscle testing. And I'm going hips, AB, adduction, fine. Knee extension, fine. I go down to his foot, cannot take any resistance with dorsiflexion, nothing with inversion, and I'm starting to sweat a little bit. I'm like, oh boy. Then I get my handy dandy, which I don't have, but my sensory testing device, which would be right here, a Kleenex. And we sell ZachCouples.com brand Kleenexes for your sensory testing device at $300 a piece because it is medical. So I go to check his foot, can't feel anything on the bottom of his foot, and I'm like, shit, can't believe this is going on. I start talking a little more, and I say, hey man, are you feeling anything else, like any numbness anywhere? And he's like, no, I just feels like my leg's weak. And I go, you having any issues, bowel or bladder? And he breaks down, and he starts crying a little bit. And this is a pretty tough guy who's like, man, dude's in serious pain. And he said, I haven't told anyone this because I was a macho dude, but at night I've been just peeing myself. I'd wake up and I'd be pissing everywhere, and I'd go, oh, shit. I actually mentally said, fuck, it's my show, I can say that. And I'm like, you have to go see the doctor today. He did. I don't know what happened. I know that he's had an MRI in the past and it showed some degenerative changes, but there was clearly a very quick status change over the last month. And the reason why I say that that's a failure is because I should have picked that up sooner. Even though he did not have any leg symptoms at the time of the evaluation, I still should have done a neurological examination on him. Given his age, given that he had a fairly high severity of pain, that was a failure on my part. And this was one of those times where even though I got the outcome I want, i.e. I referred out, I got lucky. I'm lucky I caught that when I did. And really even though I'm going to take responsibility and ownership for that, I think missing that was a failure on the medical system. Because I'm not the first practitioner that he's seen. He's seen a physician. He was going back to see this physician. He's been into the emergency room a couple times for Toradol injections because of the pain. And it's unfortunate that I have to be the first one to pick that up. But I also understand too, because I glossed over that because there wasn't leg symptoms at the time. But what is to say that he didn't have that weakness there? So it's just, I think even though I talk a lot on these debriefs about pain not equaling injury, we need to restore movement variability, that's our goal, we gotta do sleep hygiene, all that stuff, we still have to realize that there can be medical problems that require a medical fix. And he is a straight up conventional medicine approach to getting better. And I just, it kind of hit me hard today. And it was one of those moments where I realized to myself that I need to do better. And I just want to share that with you guys to make sure that you are doing everything in your power to ask the right questions. I felt very lucky that he trusted me enough to tell me about the bladder dysfunction, because he brushed it off to all the other practitioners. So I don't put that much shame on those people for not going that route and testing. But I think what it should inspire us to do is make sure we establish really good connections with our people so they feel comfortable telling you things like that. He didn't feel comfortable telling me that the first couple sessions, so I never would have picked that up. He probably would have lied to me if I had asked. We need to do everything we can to rule out any serious medical issues. So asking about bowel, bladder, asking about anesthesia or numbness in the genital region, pain going down legs, any shocking or electrifying symptoms. So like Lermite sign, for example, for someone who's got cervical myelopathy, bend forward, you get some buzzing down the arms, that's a problem. We have to take these things into account, and in no way, shape, or form should we ever negate the medical and pathological component to things. So I leave that to you guys. Without further ado though, after my little sad story, let's debrief, shall we? The first question comes from Dave Rasco. Dave asks, why is rectus abdominis bad for those with wide infrasternal angles? Yo, what up, Kyle? Bay, that's an unbelievable question. I'm going to do my best to answer that question for you. In fact, I'll do better than my best. Rectus abdominis, and I don't like saying bad, but we have to understand what the goal is. Because rectus can be pretty good for someone if they're moving some big weights. It's a superficial muscle, helps ensure pressure is maintained in the abdominal region. Big deal. Helps you with get-ups and things like that. I think it's muy importante. When it's not importante is when you are doing variability-oriented breath work, i.e. most of the stuff that I blab about for however long. What we don't want with any type of exhalation, and this is regardless of wide or narrow, is where they're bearing down, engaging rectus abdominis and superficial, well, that abdominal muscle in particular. You're probably wondering why. I'm glad you asked. We have to understand what the rectus abdominis does in the body. So it attaches to the pubic symphysis down low, so it will help with a little bit of a posterior orientation of the pelvis. Pretty cool. Up here though, and that's where we get concerned with the breathing, because it attaches to the xiphoid process, and just like the little costal cartilages on some of the ribs, really all it can do is a little bit of flexion, just like that. If you want to achieve a full exhalation, with the goal being exhaling, dropping the ribs all the way down and keeping them down so we can allow the pump handle activity, i.e. the front ribs and the sternum, to move anteriorly and superiorly. If you want to learn more about that, I'll link it in the show notes. Pump handle. We need to have more side-based abdominals kick in. What that would entail is, if I'm a wide infrasternal angle, I'll utilize a forceful exhalation to encourage external oblique activity. And the reason why that is because the external obliques have better leverage to close and narrow a wide infrasternal angle. If I'm a narrow infrasternal angle, I need more internal obliques transversus abdominis. What those guys will do is those guys will help bend the ribs so the angle widens and allows the diaphragm to ascend. What rectus limits is pump handle capabilities, and that's why it can be a problem for either of those cases. Because if I'm crunching to get my exhalation and I try to take a breath of air in, I'm not going to be able to effectively pressurize the upper thorax. If the sternum stays down, the pump handle action can't occur. What can happen, and this isn't going to happen with our exercises as likely as happened over time, but you can get a bend in the manubriosternal joint. So you got the manubrium, which is the big bony part here, and then you got the sternum, which is the long part. Some individuals will have a pump handle up position at the manubrium, and then the sternum, at the manubriosternal joint, or the angle of Lewis, will be bent. So it looks like up, down this way. Pectus excavatum could also be another potential thing that an overactive or concentrically overactive rectus could contribute to. Likely we're not going to induce that in our people. That's probably already there. But what it would do is it wouldn't allow that pump handle action to occur, except potentially at the manubrium or the manubriosternal joint. We need to make sure that we're getting more lateral and deep abdominal muscles, depending on what the infrasternal angle is, to drop the ribs as opposed to the rectus abdominis. That's really the big reason why that muscle is not necessarily ideal to kick in when we're performing breath work. We want the entire thoraco-abdominal pelvic cavity to expand on inhalation and compress during exhalation. And if you got rectus kicked in, you're not going to allow that expansion of the upper thorax to occur. What I encourage people to do to mitigate that is make sure we're coaching the exhalation nice and slow, regardless of if you're a wide or a narrow infrasternal angle. When I am a narrow, I want the super long side so that I ensure that I engage internal obliques transversus abdominis without sneaking around and actually sneaking around and not getting rectus. Because what you'll find with some of those people, if you're narrow, is if they do like a huff, they're going to kick in rectus to do that. It's more of a superficial muscle, responds to higher contractile activities like that type of exhalation, and then you're not going to put the sternum in position to allow the pump handle to occur. For a wide infrasternal angle, same thing. Even though I want some resistance, the Superman exhale or you're flickering the candle exhale, I don't want it to be super fast and short. I need you to get the air out and make it take a long time. If you do those things, you ought to circumvent rectus overactivity. Another thing to consider would be neck position. Sometimes you'll see people where they keep their neck in line with the sternum during the entire movement, and they'll either crunch up or they'll do this, cervical flexion. In those cases, a lot of times you can kind of eccentrically orient on either side of the sternum by cueing the chin to go away. You do that, it becomes very, very challenging as well from the top down to kick in the six-pack. If those things fail, encourage your clients to put their hand on their stomach and try to keep it as jelly as possible. In narrows, most of the time, they're going to feel just the whole six-pack rectus muscle kick in. On wides, not always, because the anterior muscles are generally more eccentrically oriented. But what you'll see on those guys often, or girls, is a diastasis, or it'll look like an alien is bulging out from their stomach. Not sexy by any means. If they start to feel that pop up, they know they're probably going too hard at home, so you redouble your efforts on going even slower with the exhalation. So, to summarize, rectus abdominis, no bueno when we're talking breath work. Bueno under resisted work, but not breath work. Why? Because it drops the sternum down, doesn't allow the pump handle action to occur in the upper thorax. You can't get air up there. That ain't cool. What we need to do is make sure our exhales, regardless of if you're wide or narrow, they need to be slow. Make sure the chin position is separated from sternal position, so chin up oftentimes. And make sure that they are palpating to minimize rectus activity. And if you do those things, you ought to be in business. Bae, I love you, and that was an unbelievable question. Next question comes from Dana. Dana asks, what movement limitations do you have? Do you try to change your patterns or compensations? What are the most effective things you do every day to work on your movement capabilities? Dana, that's a really good question. Here's another case study for you. So my big limitations right now, let's start from the beginning. Not that beginning, but when I first started getting into this stuff, I tried a lot of different things to see if I could move better. So what I couldn't do, I couldn't get into a deep squat, that's one thing. Had barely any shoulder internal rotation. I think I had 10 degrees when I was first doing this stuff. That's another thing. My flexion, shoulder flexion, still a joke. Ugh. Yeah, brutal. Can't get any scapular upward rotation. And hip extension is tough for me. Right hip external rotation is also a big limiting factor. And I think, and I can't horizontally abduct either side. So if we're looking at just some of the testing that I would do, those are where I'm limited in the extremities. I'm sure you guys can imagine that I'm a narrow infrasternal angle. Not super narrow though, because I can get it to open up. And neck-wise, I couldn't rotate either direction, really. My rotation sucks. And then before I got into all this, I also couldn't truise my jaw either side if we want to get really frisky. I started first by doing a bunch of different things to try and see what I could restore. I was one of those guys who could change really fast, but then things wouldn't stick. And I'll link my story in the show notes, but I'll give you the brief version. But I decided that I needed a little bit of help. I went and got treated at the Hruska Clinic. Again, you'll read about that tomorrow in the show notes. And what I got while I was there was some of the PRI vision glasses, and I got a Gelb splint. A Gelb splint allows for a little bit better occlusive capabilities in the jaw. The real reason though why my lateral occlusion was no bueno was because I still had my wisdom teeth. And so I essentially had those guys blocking my ability to truce. However, I was able to get some decent movement changes with the glasses and the splint. I was eventually able to work my way into a full squat, and now I can do that comfortably without any issues. I can even do pistol squats now if I've trained enough and I have a little bit of counterweight, which was nothing but a dream beforehand. So that was a really cool change that I would say happened within the first few months. I then came back for a follow-up. They said that I didn't need my splint as much. They made a minor tweak in my glasses prescriptions, and after that I didn't really notice much change. And I think the reason why was because I still had the wisdom teeth being my rate limiting step at that point. So what I did after that was eventually I got this was probably 2014, I got my wisdom teeth pulled, and now I can move my jaw side to side pretty well. I was sleeping better, my heart rate variability improved. These were just some of the other things that I was measuring, so really cool stuff. I noticed some changes in testing. My shoulder internal rotation and horizontal abduction were definitely a lot better. Not much change lower body as I would like. Although I could actually extend my hips if I did some work and adduct to the table if we're talking about an Ober's test. That was the first major thing that I ended up doing. And after I did that, and I didn't write about this, but I went to this dentist who got my wisdom teeth taken out, and he did a 3D CT scan of my cranium. What he found was I had a deviated septum. So I'm like, okay, great. I can't breathe through my nose. This makes a lot of sense. I was always one of those stuffy nose kids in school, mouth breather growing up, still kind of a mouth breather to this day, though I'm fighting it. I just, if you ask people close to me, I breathe really loud. And I'm like, okay, well, let's see if we can get this fixed. So I went to an ENT in Chandler, Arizona, where I was living at the time. They didn't want to do the surgery right away. We did some stuff for allergies, did nothing. Eventually, I ended up getting the surgery while I was in Memphis, and I'm really glad that I waited for that. The surgeon in Chandler was going to, he wasn't going to do much to the septum, but I had like these cysts in my cheeks. Gosh, my mind's blank right now, so if anyone says what that is, let me know. But I had some cysts here in the cavity, and I had an enlarged turbinate. So he was just going to pop the cysts and take the turbinate out. I'm glad that didn't happen, because if you take a turbinate out, you are at risk for what's called empty nose syndrome. Basically, because the anatomy of the nose has changed, you actually will get a rebound in symptoms. It's not necessarily a desirable thing. If you want to learn more, I'm not the person to ask, but I'll link it in the show notes. Nose syndrome. However, when I went to Memphis, I had a pretty sharp ENT. He's like, yeah, Zach, your septum is deviated all the way to the side, your turbinate's enlarged, so what we're going to do is we're going to shave the turbinate. The cysts evidently aren't a big deal, so you don't want to get those popped. And then instead of removing the enlarged turbinate, he gave me a little bit of liposuction. That's why I look so skinny. So he liposucked the turbinate to make it smaller. And that was the first major treatment where I saw some pretty remarkable changes. Biggest change that was measurable was within 2 weeks after I had gotten that, after the inflammatory process cleared out and all of that fun stuff, my resting heart rate dropped 10 beats per minute. And I was doing tons of cardio, tons of cardiac output. I was a runner, but was always in the 60s with my resting heart rate. Now I sit in the low 50s on a regular basis, and sometimes too, as I lose weight, I'll actually dip into the 40s. Remarkable change. I had way more movement in my thorax. My neck was a lot looser. It was just unbelievable. So if that's something you guys need, like a septal deviation, it's probably worthwhile to actually take a look at it. However, as time went on, I still get a little bit of some of the stuffiness, still breathe kind of loud through my nose, although my kept the resting heart rate changes. So some of the movement limitations that I'm currently working on right now are my ability to pump handle. Since I can keep the angle down or keep the lower rib cage down, I need my pump handle activity to increase. My two major resets or movement activities I do to work on that are hangs from a bar. I'll link that in the show notes. And I do a feet elevated downward dog. Those are the two big ones that I do, because that's like me being able to get overhead is primo, because eventually what I want to be able to do is overhead press. It's not pretty right now. So that's one thing that I'm working on as of right now. And those are really like the two big resets that I've been trying to focus on. I also do some hip extension work, so I'll do like a single leg hip thrust variation just to work on that with the arms overhead so I can encourage pump handle activity. And a lot of times just those three moves gets me going well enough to do what I need to do in the gym. And I will readily admit I'm not doing a huge emphasis on that because I'm emphasizing some other stuff right now. But every time I work out, which is about 5 days a week, I will do that stuff leading into the session. So those are some of the movement limitations that I'm working on currently. What I'm trying to do down the line though is I'm very much into self-experimentation. The wisdom teeth extraction was self-experimentation. The septal thing was self-experimentation. And I'm going to do a few other things up here just to see what happens. Worst case scenario is I have a bigger airway and I sleep better. But I've been talking with my buddy Joe Cicinelli. I'll link him in the show notes. He's a super smart dude you guys should know about. And I may have a tongue tie, a mild tongue tie. Or I think it's grade 3, maybe it's not so mild. And so I do work a lot on being able to keep my tongue on the roof of my mouth and opening my jaw so I can stretch my frenulum. But I'm probably going to get that clipped just to see if that allows me to better keep my tongue on the roof of the mouth. And I'm also going to do some myofunctional therapy with that just to see what happens with that. Once I've completed that, I need to figure out something to fix this portly face of mine, the sad face. But if you can see, my orbits are here and my maxilla is a little bit further back and my jaw is kind of retruded, even though I have a class 1 occlusion. If you want to learn more about that, I'll link that in the show notes because I think I talked about it one time. What I need to do to maximize the airway is actually push all of this forward so my palate's in a good position to allow pressure to occur here and the airway's a little bit more open. That's what's also on docket in the future. I don't know how I'm going to do that though. I'm looking at possibly I think it's called an anterior growth or a fixed growth guidance appliance. I'll link that in the show notes as well for those who are curious. But basically what it does is it stimulates bone growth in the palate as you push forward in the maxilla and the mandible. So it's a pretty slick appliance and it doesn't involve surgery. Otherwise, some of the other options that I'm aware of are surgeries. And if I don't have to spend a bunch of buck on surgery, I won't. So I'm probably going to do that and then get braces. And then we're going to see what happens. But that's kind of where I'm at from a movement journey standpoint and where I'm going in the future. So big summary is I need to get overhead, I need tons of pump handle, and I want to fix my face so I can be even prettier than I am. Dana, great question. The last question comes from Jason. Jason asks, does everything, our nervous system, and so our musculoskeletal system automatically performs, so our reflexive-based activities, occur to ensure stability via form and force closure? Or in other words, is stability the driver for all dynamic and active postures we see? Or in other words, as it's still a bit hard to word my question, does having joint stability govern all subconscious movement? Thanks. This is a doozy of a question. I've been putting this question off for a very long time, Jason. I apologize because it's kind of a tough one and I didn't know, I had to think about it. And my short answer is, I don't think we know. We simply don't know. And we also have to ask, what does stability mean? And so I'm seeing joint stability, so I'm going to probably make an assumption that stability means we don't fall flat on our face, or the joints are in good positions to ensure we can manage gravity. Let's just call it that. And I don't know if stability is the thing that governs all movements, because there are a lot of people out there who have multidirectional instability or laxity within their joints. And I would say, based on that definition, they're probably not stable, if we're saying tough at managing anti-gravity. Moreover, we get people, like our older population, who get a large amount of stiffness within some of their joints, and they often fall a lot. So very stable in the joints, but not so stable in terms of gravity management. I think the key that governs our dynamic postures and movements, movement limitations, and resting muscle tension has to do with survival. Survival is the biggest thing. What do I mean by that? What, from a movement standpoint, is going to best help me manage the external environment, so all of this stuff, one, and the internal environment, all of this stuff. If you get a chance to attend Bill Hartman's intensive, I'll link that in the show notes, you should. And I'm not going to get too deep into this because I don't understand it to the extent that he does, so he'd be a guy to check out. But all of our internal organs, to an extent, influence the way we move because there are forces going within those organs. Our guts, for example, have 270 degrees of rotation, so they have a little bit of spin to them. Due to their attachments and the forces of gravity, that causes the guts, as an example, to predispose us to one side or go to one side because of their orientation. There's a spin in the heart, there's forces within us from blood flow, there's lots of different forces based on our internal anatomy that we have to deal with. Given that and the demands of the external environment, our body systems have to do whatever is in their power to ensure that we can manage that. In some individuals, that may be increasing joint stability to minimize movement, to allow them to perform the tasks that they need to perform. In some individuals, on the other side, we can have too much movement, eccentric orientation, and maybe that allows them to manage their respective environments. Both of those potentially having consequences. But on either extreme, both of those could be advantageous given the environment that that person is in. If I'm a dancer, I probably want to have a lot of eccentric orientation in my muscles. If I am a power lifter, I might want to have some more concentric orientation in my muscles because I need to be way more stable in that than maybe I do as a gymnast. It varies from individual to individual. So I don't think that joint stability is the governor. I think survival is the governor. And all systems are going to work together to ensure that survival happens. Your bodies aren't going to do anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with multidirectional instability, and there's nothing wrong with hypertension. Hypertension seems like a pretty good strategy if I am in an abusive relationship, I have a high stress job, and I'm not happy with myself. Well, it would make sense that if I'm having all of these activities that cause a spike in blood pressure throughout my day, well, why not raise the resting level so I can get to the higher end a lot sooner? Same thing if I'm someone who's got multidirectional instability. Maybe they want to play baseball and they don't have the structure that would allow them to be super successful unless they created that instability. It's really hard to say if anything is bad. Now, there can be things that are probably maladaptive if that person is trying to do something else in a different environment. But your body is always going to make the best decision it can to try to match demands. So as long as you are surviving, your body is probably doing everything it can to make that happen. What we have to do as movement experts is, if this strategy is not working for that people, given their internal and external stressors and forces that they have to undergo, we have to provide them a different strategy. And in some people, maybe that's enhancing stability, and I hate to say that, but maybe that's increasing more concentric orientation, maybe by giving them an orthotic or something like that. Or in some people, maybe they gotta go a little bit more eccentric, and we have to get them a little bit more joint mobility. So that allows them to manage whatever environmental needs they have to manage. So to summarize your question, Jason, the biggest thing that we have to focus on is survival when we're talking about what governs our action. At least that's what I think. And that's going to occur due to a combination of internal and external demands, and how your body has decided via all its systems to best manage those demands. Unbelievable question, Jason. And whew, that was a long one. Thank you guys for being patient. I apologize for the technical difficulties, but I think that's a good stopping point for us today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you want to learn more about Big Z, here's where you can find me. First, go to zachcouples.com. While you're there, go to the right-hand side and you want to subscribe to my newsletter. What you will find is 4.5 hours of me talking, 3.5. I think 3 are about breathing, 1.5 hours is about pain, practical pain science. What? You're going to get 50 pages of notes to those talks. You're going to get a free acute to chronic workload calculator based on some of Tim Gabbitt's work. You're going to get weekend goodies every Friday. What's dope in the neighborhood? I will show you what is dope in the internet neighborhood. That's what happens when you subscribe to the newsletter. Also, I offer 3 online services that I'm sure you would love to be a part of. First, a movement consultation. Maybe you're toying and not moving as well as you'd like to. Maybe you are too darn rectus heavy when you're doing some breathing based activities and you don't know what to do. Maybe you want to manage your environment better. I can help you with that. Go to zachcouples.com, subscribe to or sign up for a movement consultation. What we'll do is we'll look at every movement in your body, make a plan, a movement plan based on what your needs are, and we'll see what we can do to help you meet your goals. That would be a movement consultation. I also offer mentoring. Maybe you were intrigued by some of the stuff that I talked about today, but you want to know how to better apply it to your specific population. I can be your guy. Definitely hit me up for the mentorship program. Or maybe you want to get big time concentric orientation in your muscles because you want to get yoked. Maybe you want to lean out. Or maybe you're post-rehab and you're unsure of how to safely load. I can be your guy for that because I offer online training. What we'll do is we'll go through movement consultation. So I have a movement baseline in terms of what your skills are. Once we've done that, I will design a plan tailored to your needs. We will adjust month to month, depending on how you're doing, week to week, because I want you to meet your goals and I'd be happy to help you along the path. Definitely hit me up for online training. Once you have scoured zachcouples.com, you'll definitely want to subscribe to me on iTunes via the Zach Couples Show or Stitcher if that's your thing. Because guess what, folks? There are 63 other debriefs that I've done. You really want to look at this guy for all 63? Maybe you do. I don't know. But not when you're driving it, you don't. So definitely bring me on a nice trip by subscribing to me on iTunes or Stitcher. That's the Zach Couples Show. And please leave a review so we can increase the fan size. The other places you can find me are on social media. Facebook, that's you guys, /Z Couples. My Twitter handle is @ZCouples. That Instagram, baby! Zach, Z-A-C, couple C-U-P-B-L-A-S. And last but not least, go to YouTube if you want a cornucopia of exercises. I got a bunch of videos on there. Just search Zach Couples, you'll find me. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. You are beautiful, sexy, outstanding people. I want you to keep it real, but not to the extent where things go wrong. Stay hungry, stay learning, stay moving, and I'll see you next time. Deuces.